Hey everyone, welcome back to the live stream. Sorry about last week. Little thunderstorm freaked everybody out. It was chaotic in the house, but we are back today and we are going to be talking about 5 reasons why I picked Jira as a career. Now, before we get into it, let me make sure I take care of some of the administrative things here. Let me close my live stream and let me pull up make sure the mic's working well. It looks like it is. Let me pull up the comments section. Okay, those are up, and I think I've advertised it to everybody I was going to advertise it to, so I think we're good. Let's just get into it today. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about why. Why is so important to me, and I want to focus on why I picked Jira. I could have done any number of things, and I'm going to walk you a little bit through my life history. I'm going to walk you a little bit through my resume, if you will. Try to keep it entertaining. Try to keep it interesting. Hi, Hisnick. Thank you for coming. Appreciate you being here. And so I'm gonna kind of walk you through, and so you can kind of see the path that I took and the decisions I had to make along the way. I'm gonna share some of those with you, and then eventually to like how did I end up in this space? Like how did I end up on this live stream making content on like Atlassian, Jira, Confluence, things of that nature. So hopefully this is exciting to you. I'm gonna try to make it a little personable. Try to share some of those lessons, those life lessons that you typically have to wait like 10 years to find out, and so I'm going to try to give you as much information as possible, and hopefully give you a compelling reason to join me on the Jira side. Become a Jira administrator, a Jira evangelist, whatever you want to call it. The community is huge, and if I can encourage one person to kind of pursue this as a career, I think I would have done my job today. So let's jump into the slides here. Let me go into presentation mode, and hopefully this all works out okay. So we got Hisnick in the room. So thank you, Hisnick, for stopping by. It's been a while, Hisnick, so appreciate you coming. And hopefully you get some value out of this. I'm really, really excited to share. Not a lot of people know like my origin story. Not a lot of people know where I've been, my credibility in the space of Jira and being an agile and all those good things. So I think this is a good opportunity to kind of share those things and hopefully encourage a couple of you, motivate you, encourage you, inspire you. I think I'm reaching really, really far, but let's see what comes out of this. So 5 reasons why I chose Jira as a career. But first, let's talk about my journey with Jira and more broadly Agile and as a whole. And so I'm not really big on PowerPoint, so this is all going to be kind of PowerPoint driven. So please don't mind the fact that this is going to be kind of a very dry PowerPoint, but it's going to be the story. I'm going to be kind of focusing on the story, and I'm going to be teeter tottering between my you basically looking at me and in the part in the presentation here. So let's start off with my first job. So everything kind of goes back to about 2010. That's when I started my career at Boeing. I was working at Boeing for about a year and a half as an intern before as a I wasn't really software. I was like an IT intern working on the C-17 aircraft, which is the really, really big carrier that Boeing used to manufacture for carrying like troops and for the United States Air Force. So I used to work on that program, that plane, for about a year and a half of my career while I was still in school. I was getting my bachelor's in computer engineering, and I was kind of working part time at Boeing because the Boeing facility and my school was actually like 3 or 4 miles away. So it was really easy for me to go back and forth between campus and Boeing and just be able to do both. So that was kind of like the beginning. But when I graduated from Boeing, I'm sorry, when I graduated from college and I basically got my first time job, I went into IT within Boeing and I was in a rotation program. And I really, really liked that I started in a rotation program because sometimes you just don't know what you want to do with your life. And so many companies have like these like leadership based or just rotation based programs that give you a taste. They give you a teaser of like different roles and responsibilities that you can do within a company, and it's really interesting. It's a great way to just learn about the company. It's a great way to learn about you, your interests, what you like, what you don't like, things, areas that you should absolutely avoid, and stuff like that. So I started in a rotation program, and I did my first rotation. I was a SQL developer, so I was writing like JQL, sorry, not JQL, but just SQL queries, and kind of working with databases and things of that nature. Big data was like just coming out. This was like 2012, and like data warehousing was like huge. And so I did my first 1 full year rotation in there. And then for my second year, I actually by following the rules, I actually gotten myself, I not really in trouble, but I kind of pigeonholed myself because for the rotations, there were select managers that were hosting these rotation e's, the people that were basically rotating. And the head of the program sent an email to everybody, to the managers and to all the full-time employees that were in the rotation program, to basically, um, that we had to use this like online portal to essentially pick our next rotation, and we weren't allowed to engage with the managers directly. We had to like go and put in our preferences. And so I followed the rules, and everybody got the rotation except for me. And when I was like, forget this, I'm gonna go figure out what's going on. Turns out the manager that I wanted got laid off, and he just didn't even care, and he didn't bother to tell anybody. So I ended up going with like my last pick because I literally was the last person to not like get my rotation. So I got the last option that was literally available, and it was a blessing. I thought I was gonna hate it because it was like, man, I didn't get to pick it, and I'm literally just getting what's left over. But this opportunity, um, allowed me to actually write code, which was exciting, because I was a software. I mean, I got a degree in engineering, and it was the first time that I was basically able to practice what I had gone to college for. And so I was really really interested in it. It got me coding. It got me working with IT stuff. So I was working with Red Hat Enterprise Linux. I was working with CentOS, so very Linux administrative heavy. So this was like my first like full teaser, or my first full introduction into like the world of IT and systems administration and things of that nature. So I'm very grateful now looking back, but I can guarantee you that when I was in that position and I was like sweating because it was like literally the only option left, and I was like, why doesn't anybody want this spot? I was hating it, but it ended up being probably the best decision of my life. And I bring this up, and it's really important in my career because when you see this presentation here, we see Boeing IT, but the first thing we see is TFS. And so when I joined this team used to be a very interesting team that they basically, they own software development tools for the Boeing company. And so I basically got to join that team, but not only did they own the tools, but they also owned like the processes. And Agile was a big part of this all. So when I joined this specific team in my second rotation, I was first introduced to Agile there. Um, the program that I was working on was literally like an internal Jira that Boeing used to have, that needed to migrate from one version of like Linux to a different Linux because the old one was full of vulnerabilities and just very insecure. And so we needed to move to Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which was a very secure operating system, and still is, right? But that was like my first teaser where I had to learn like what Agile was, bug tracking, issue tracking, just task management. And I got to basically not work on the application itself, but work on like the IT, the infrastructure portion of that application. And that gave me my very, very first exposure to this world of like, hey, we can do stuff and not on a sticky, and we can work collaboratively, and developers can like check their code. And it was awesome. It was really, really big eye opener because in college, I learned how to code, but just to answer the questions from whatever my instructors gave to me. It was never like a collaborative team effort. And so working at Boeing gave me my first exposure to that. Now, fast forward about 6 months after I started my rotation, Boeing announced this initiative to essentially move anybody that lived in the state of California or in the state of Washington and were employed with Boeing. They were going to have to be moving to St. Louis, Missouri, or Charleston, South Carolina. I picked the lesser of two evils, in my opinion. Sorry to anybody that lives in Charleston, South Carolina, but I moved to St. Louis, Missouri, and I packed up my wife and my little boy at the time. I had a less than 2-year-old boy, and we kind of just moved to the Midwest. Now, I did this for one reason, and that reason is here with this TFS. Anybody in the chat know what TFS is? Anybody want to take a guess? Anybody heard of TFS? I'll give you a hint. You've probably heard of TFS. You probably just haven't heard it in that way. So if I say another word, this word might give it away. So has anybody ever heard of Azure DevOps? Anybody in the chat want to admit to having heard of Azure DevOps? I'm sure if you're in this space and if you're interested in my content, I'm sure you've heard of Azure DevOps. So in the chat, let me know if you've heard of it. But anyways, TFS is the precursor to Azure DevOps. Before the cloud, before all these technologies that we have today, 10 years ago, 10 years ago, we were on a date and like on a server, and Team Foundation Server, or TFS, was Microsoft's offering. And I really, really liked TFS because I was a developer. And back then, TFS was actually baked, it was cooked into Visual Studio. So you could be writing your code as a developer, and you can be looking at your tasks in the editor yourself, and then like kind of doing your commits and all the stuff that we take today for granted. It was all in that interface. It was, you never had to leave your editor. You never had to leave Visual Studio. So from that perspective, it was really, really convenient. And so I got my first exposure to Visual Studio and my very first exposure to Team Foundation Server in like 2013 timeframe. But one key thing happened. Because I elected to move to St. Louis, Boeing promoted me to basically be responsible, be the architect, the solutions architect for Team Foundation Server for the entire Boeing company, for all software development at the company. Now, this was a huge endeavor, a huge responsibility, and something that I basically did for almost the next year. And so it was really, really interesting. It was really fun to kind of like learn the tool. I got flown out to Microsoft a bunch of times. I did a bunch of trainings with Microsoft employees. The guy that worked at Boeing that actually like was my mentor, he had written like 4 books on how to use TFS, and he was like a published at like book writer. And so I had a lot of like exposure very, very quickly on how to like not only manage the tool, but like how to use it and how to provide like enterprise value to companies that you were using TFS. So TFS was really, really, really powerful, really, really big part of Boeing. A lot of the applications were built using Microsoft technologies, and so having that TFS issue tracking system within your developer environment was really, really key, really, really instrumental, and we try to encourage everybody to use it. So that was my first exposure. That was basically me for the very first time. Like, not obviously not Jira, but if you think back 2013, right? That was a while ago. That was like my first time, like really, really, like literally being given keys to a kingdom, and like here's a project management tool. It's agile based. Here's sprints, and here's all this good stuff. And like that's my very first introduction. And I think if I hadn't followed that path, where it was like very sudden, it was a happy accident where I didn't really expect to enjoy it. I didn't, like I said, right? I had my sight on my first option for that second rotation, that ended up just like falling to pieces. Out of my control, that manager got laid off, and he just completely neglected me and completely ignored that rotation program. And by just serendipity, I picked this other rotation. I mean, being honest, I didn't really pick it. It was the only one that was left. I bonded with the manager really, really well. He recognized that I went to USC and his son went to USC, so we bonded really well. He was such a great manager, one of my favorite managers to date, and I got to basically be in charge of all this tool. It was awesome. It was a big, huge responsibility, and it was a great exposure to learn so much about what it meant to be agile at scale, at an enterprise. And keep in mind, again, agile at this point is still very much in its infancy. It's very much not what it is today. And and if you've been listening, you've kind of heard me say the the interface was in Visual Studio, which meant you were basically only using it if you were a developer. And so the notion of Scrum Masters and all that stuff, like everybody had to be within Visual Studio. And if you don't know what Visual Studio is, bless your soul, but it's basically a code editor. So you're writing code. And so it's really interesting that like, I mean, back then there wasn't an expectation that this stuff would blow up beyond just software development. And I think at Jira or Atlassian, I think they get a lot of credit for really standardizing it as a whole, right? And I think that's how eventually we're going to get to Jira here in this topic today. But that was that very first exposure, and it was really, really interesting to just kind of learn. Now, fast forward a little bit, things didn't go too well. At one point, I accidentally, well, I didn't, but the server where we used to house TFS, it kind of crashed one day. It took me about 17 hours to get it fixed. on a $500 an hour call with Microsoft to get it fixed. And at the end of 17 hours, I got into a lot of trouble. My manager was not very happy that it took me 17 hours and a few $1,000s later to get this resolved. And I realized then and there in my career that no matter how hard you work, um, you're always going to be perceived by your failures. And so that was a really, really big, like, eye-opening lesson to me, like, right very early in my career. I mean, keep in mind, at this point, when I had this failure in my life, I probably had graduated from college, I don't know, 19, 20 months prior, like, not even 2 years of being a graduate and being in corporate America. So I'm really, really thankful that I learned that lesson very early on as well. So let's fast forward a little bit and we'll enter 2016. So we're going to fast forward about 2 years here. And I was in IT. Once I left that TFS life behind me, I went over to be a scripter. Again, I wanted to kind of get back into coding. And so I wanted to leave the life of being an IT admin behind. And so I went over to the exchange team at Boeing. I was their main developer, scripter, automating things. I really, really enjoyed that. But that was a gig that basically let me work from home 24/7, but I literally had to work 24/7 every 8 weeks. I was on a rotation program because email can never go down. And so after a almost near death experience, I was like, you know what? I think I need to get myself on the same schedule as my wife because driving sleep deprived is not something you should be doing. So in 2016, I applied for a formal software engineering position. So I was kind of leaving IT behind and I entered DevOps. Now, almost sounds ironic because I had a change from IT as a job classification to software engineering as a job classification so that I can go and then do more IT work. So I eventually got a position, I got a clearance, and I got to go work for this team. I was on an actual plane again. So this was the first time in like 6 years at Boeing that I was back on an actual aircraft. Because when you're in IT, you're supporting all the aircraft, but you don't belong to an aircraft. And so this was kind of cool that I was finally back on a specific plane, and it gave you that sense of ownership, that sense of pride a lot more. And so I started working on training systems for the Navy's Poseidon P-8. And so that one was a really cool airplane. If you never looked at it, highly recommend check it out. It's a really, really cool naval aircraft. But we worked on the trainers. We worked on the simulations to be able to teach the Navy how to use the aircraft so that they wouldn't crash and burn like the multi-million-dollar plane. And all that software development happened in an agile way. And so by the time I came to this level of my life, I had like locked in agile. I had been an agile practitioner since 2013. So 3 years of like evangelizing software engineering at Boeing, and using agile. That was like kind of cool. But now when I switched over to this other team and we're doing DevOps over here, everything was kind of the same. We're still using the TFS and all that good stuff. But Boeing by 2016 had matured quite a bit. And they decided to switch to what's formerly known as Scaled Agile Framework, or SAFe. And so I'm sure many of you have heard of SAFe before. And so I was part of like the leading team that basically helped transition the Boeing company from just vanilla Agile to the Scaled Agile. And with it came version 1. If you've ever attended any of like my courses or any of like my talks on like my thoughts on Jira versus version 1, I do have a video coming out. Actually, I don't. I have one soon. I'll talk about version 1 versus Jira. But version 1 was basically the tool of choice for a safe-based organization. So I spent a lot of time training, learning how to use it. I was not an administrator at this point, which was a kind of a different job for me because usually I was in IT and I was at administrating it. But version 1 was like my first true in the cloud application that basically allowed us to practice safe. And so this was a very interesting time in my life because for the next like year or so, this transition was occurring. I learned everything about safe. Boeing went deep into safety. I mean, we had the top of the line trainers. Everybody was getting certified left and right, and it was a really interesting like just pioneer path, like setting the path for scaled agile at Boeing. And it was a great experience to kind of learn and appreciate how scaled agile would work, and then taking all of my knowledge of like of of just Agile as a whole, all my experience with TFS, and now like adding the version one interface and seeing how to do it all, but scaled up, right? But still doing sprints, still doing daily scrums, all that great stuff. But I was a developer. I was kind of like a practitioner. I was not the scrum master. I wasn't the Jira admin or the administrator for the tool. I was just one of the people, the developers, if you will, right? Where I got to learn everything and kind of see things from different lenses, from different perspectives, and I think this was really good. But during my tenure there, my wife and I, we decided to have another baby. And as if you haven't caught on by now, I'm living in St. Louis, Missouri. I currently live and reside in Southern California. So after about a year of doing DevOps and version one, and basically my entire track history of doing TFS and Agile at Boeing, so about 3 years of like solid, like under my belt, just doing Agile every day for work. Northrop Grumman ended up buying me and my wife out. And I literally mean they literally came and gave us like $100,000 relocation package and moved us from St. Louis, Missouri to Southern California. And so when I was at Northrop Grumman, I did DevOps again. Now I got hired because I used to do DevOps for Boeing. And so I naturally got hired to do the exact same job, but not for the competitor. Now, this right here, this is now Halloween. We're coming up. It's going to be my 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. It's going to be my 6-year anniversary of coming over to Northrop Grumman on October of 2016. And this was the first time that I learned and heard about Jira. So up until like basically Halloween of 2016, I had never heard of Jira before. I had been exposed to like competitive products to Jira, and I had been exposed to the methodology that is Agile and Scaled Agile for all these years. But this 2016 was the first time where my boss was like, here's Jira, here's how Northrop develops software, here's our tools, here's our processes, and here's their charter, right? And it is take this tool. It was very infant. Jira had probably been around at Boeing for, I don't know, 3, maybe 4 months from when I joined. So it was something that was super new. They were just rolling it out. I think at this point, Atlassian's finally starting to get some traction. And fun fact, Jira back then, you could actually buy Jira for just $10. You could have bought it in perpetuity, have a license to Jira server. You can download a file, install it on your computer, and you could have Jira in perpetuity for 10 whooping dollars. Like that was cheap back then. And so I joined. I was responsible for this. I was an administrator, and this is where I had to learn how to configure, how to be the system administrator for Jira, what is now called Data Center, but back then used to be called Jira Server. And so that was really my very first exposure to Jira, and it was kind of like drink water from the fire hose. But take everything I had learned about version one, take everything I had learned about TFS and being an administrator for that tool, and then basically applying it to Northrop software development across the greater Southern California region. So this was really, really a fun time because it wasn't like me by myself. When I was at Boeing doing TFS, like it was me, like I owned TFS and I was like the only person. But now I had a team. Now there was like 9 of us, and collectively, like we all shared the responsibility of keeping the lights on for Jira. So we all got to learn a lot because since Jira was so new to Northrop as a whole, so it was new to all of us, and the entire team that kind of got hired to do all this, we were all new to the process. We had never heard of Jira before. We were familiar with like Agile. We were familiar with like task like management, but Jira was completely new to all 9 of us. And so every day was like a learning opportunity. Every day was like a let's try this and see what happens because none of us know anything. It was a lot of here's all the documentation, read through all the documentation, right? So it was a big trial by fire. And I kind of like I felt like I was a newbie because obviously Jira is a whole new interface, but I also felt very experienced because I knew the bigger purpose. I knew the bigger vision of what Jira could do, and I was always comparing it to TFS. And I'm not gonna lie, when I first jumped into the Jira scene, I hated it. I hated that it was web based. I hated that To switch between Jira and Confluence and like Crowd, if you've ever remember those tools, right? You had to change, like it was a different tab, right? It was like a whole different interface, and there was no consistency. With TFS, you were all in one spot, and with version one, you were all in one spot. But coming over to Jira, I was like, why in the world do I have all these tabs open? And like, what is this interface? What's going on? And I just absolutely didn't like it. I didn't like that it was so horizontal. I was used to the vertical integration of Team Foundation Server. I was used to the vertical integration of version one. But when we came to Jira, it was like the way it worked, the way it connected with other tools, it was so different. It was just not something that I was used to. And it took me a while to really, really fall in love with the tool. Um, so fast forward a little bit, I basically was a Jira administrator for about 2 years at Northrop Grumman. So this puts us into about 2018, end of 2018 timeframe, where I, after 2 years of like being in this space, and like kind of again being the administrator and also growing beyond Jira, right? This team, this DevOps team that I was in, we managed like all the tools and processes for software development. So I went to a ton of scrums. I was evangelizing like how to do Jira, how to do Agile, like how to plan your sprint. So a lot of like what I do today, but only within like the confines of like Northrop Grumman, right? And the app and the aircrafts that we supported there. And so it was like a really small scale, right? Like a few hundred people versus now like my scale is like thousands of people, right? Because everybody from all over the world like watches my videos, right? And fun fact, we're almost getting to about 100,000 views and across all my videos in YouTube. So thank you to everybody that has watched. Thank you to everybody that has subscribed. Thank you to everybody that has dropped likes. If you're in the chat here, thank you to everybody that's dropped a like so far in the chat. I literally wouldn't be doing this stuff without you guys. But anyways, so yeah, so we were doing a bunch of other tools. So it wasn't just Jira. There was a lot of like tools like Selenium. There was tools with respect to like VMware. I kind of did a lot with vSphere. There was a lot of stuff with V Horizon. So a lot of IT based cool, awesome things to really scale. Oh, and we did a lot of builds. So TeamCity, Jenkins. So a lot of configurations there, which which was what I did. I was like a DevOps IT admin. I basically configured a bunch of different tools for deployments, for builds, for automated testing, for obviously project management like Jira. So it was a really, really good exposure. And I'm really, really happy that I spent those 2 years learning that stuff because it gives you a lot of appreciation. It gives you a lot of perspective because you know the tool intimately. You know the best practices. You know what the limitations of the tools are. I think so many people today jump into Jira with just being a scrum master, just being a product owner, being a developer, that you don't really know what Jira can do. You know, like the marketing stuff, you know what's published out there, but you don't know the true raw horsepower that this application has. You don't know the limitations. You don't know the boundaries that you can take this tool to. And so kind of like Maverick, right? So if you guys have ever seen Top Gun, right? Like where it's like Maverick's like, hey, you're going like the enemy knows the specs of your plane, but only you know the limits of it, right? And we're gonna find out what your limits are. Like I kind of feel like it's a little bit like that because Jira, I do this Jira all day, every day, and I feel like I'm scratching the surface, right? Like I probably know like 10% of what this thing can do, and it's very humbling that Atlassian has like created this massive product that has so many different use cases and so many different applications and so many different teams use it in so many different ways, and yet it's still fundamentally the same exact same product, but so many different ways to interpret it. And again, I don't think I would have the same level of appreciation that I have for the tool today had I not been like had I not been paid like a 9 to 5 to learn this stuff, but also like started so heavily in the IT administrative side of the house, right? Where literally my job, the way I got paid was to do this administrative stuff. And I did it as a cop out, right? Because I enjoyed coding, but I was never really good at it. And IT was easier. IT was something that I can Google a lot easier. It was something that I was a lot better at. And I never froze. Like coding really always got me really worried and really nervous and really scared. And imposter syndrome kicked in like nobody's business. And like this IT stuff was easy. It was doable, and it was cool. It was interesting. It was challenging. It was stressful. Every once in a while, those servers would go down, and like it was like all hands on deck. I'll tell you guys a funny story. If you guys ever do have Jira, like, or Confluence, like that you own it, like in a data center, um, don't put your documentation for restoring the system in Confluence, because I did that once. Our servers went down, and like all the media and all the instructions for like how to bring the servers back up, they were in the server that was down, and so there was no way my team can access it. And so that was like those kind of stories and those kind of frustrations. They're really, really interesting to, again, be a part of, and again, not do it alone. I really enjoyed that I had a team. We had a group of 9, 10 people, that we basically all went through this struggle together, and we all kind of learned this tool together, and we all got to like practice it. We got to eat our dog food with it, and we had to use Jira, and we had to be experts at it, because we had to teach everybody else. We had to teach the rest of the company how to use Jira, how to integrate it with builds, how to do the entire DevOps lifecycle, from like source code management, and like we were doing branches and like how to do Git flow. Tom, you were good at coding. No, Tom. So this is the story of what happened after I left your team. And so it was a lot of fun, and it was interesting. But then, um, I got a master's in systems engineering, and one day I got an opportunity. I was at the gym, and some guy was like doing small talk with me. We were sharing a bench, and he was like, "Hey, like, what's your story?" And I told him like, "Well, I have a master in systems engineering and all this stuff." And he's like, "Oh, I'm a systems engineer." And so he like made some calls and like got me in an interview, and like over like 2 weeks, I went from being a software engineer to being a systems engineer, and it was really interesting because I wanted to try it out, because I have a master's in systems engineering, but I had just never done anything with it. And so I decided to leave that entire like IT, all of that life behind. And I was like, I'm gonna go do this now. And so I did a pivot in, I guess, what would have been 2019, end of 2018, early 2019. And I came over and I became a TPM. So this is like a technical program manager. Oops, getting ahead of my story here. And so I became a technical program manager, as a systems engineer, and it was fun. I got to learn a lot of the processes. So I went from being like the Jira administrator to now being the Jira user with a like $1 million a day budget. And it was crazy. It was like such a mind shift of like, hey, no longer do you have to worry about keeping Jira's lights on, but now you have to use Jira to keep everybody accountable, to have the entire team collaborate, to have the entire team communicate. And I was like, well, this is my jam, because up until this point, I had been evangelizing how to use the tools and how to do the processes. But now I was like, okay, now it was time to put them into practice and into use. So this is really where I like got closer to becoming a scrum master than anything else, where I was like essentially really leveraging the power of Jira. And again, this part, right? This is interesting, and I kind of want to focus on this for another second here. I don't think I would have been as good as a TPM, as a program manager that I was at that point, had I not understood the power of Jira. Because when I saw gaps in the communication of my team, when I saw that one team was like missing something, or there was clearly like a gap in just like the process, or just something was missing, I can visualize, okay, how do I fix this communication problem? By manipulating Jira. And since I knew Jira really, really intimately, I knew it inside and out, and I still had my administrative access, because just 2 weeks prior, I was the Jira administrator. I was able to like manipulate the tool and really improve our usage of, for my specific program, really improve the usage of Jira to help everybody use the tool better. And that's really like what caught a lot of attention, and like really propelled my career at Northrop, because no longer were we just doing like a compliance, like here's the tool that everybody uses because the team that I used to work on says everybody has to use it. But now I was like on the other side of the table, like driving change and driving utilization of like I knew the ins and outs of the tool, and I knew how to like fold the process with the gaps that I was seeing to really like connect those, bridge those gaps, and get the team really really efficient and like working through. And so I got really, really good at this. When a new director came in, she basically fired everybody but me. I was like one of the very few people that actually got to stay because I was good at my job. I was good at like leveraging Jira and finagling this thing to get it to work right so that everybody um you didn't choose the Jira life chose you. I like that. I gotta put that one on a t-shirt. But yeah, so basically, like again, so I did a lot of this, and I got really really good. And this Tiger team came in. This new director came in. She came in with like her like executive team, and like they had used Jira before, but they kind of just used the bare bones. And then when they saw what I was doing with Jira, they're like, "Whoa, what else can we do?" And so we started experimenting a lot more, and that's where I really started again pushing boundaries on what can I do with Jira? How can I communicate up and down all my stakeholders and the kind of metrics we were pulling, the integrations that we're building to basically show dependencies and test management and all that stuff. Like it was really really powerful stuff. Um, yeah, shirt design. Yeah, so I just got a Cricut and I'm making t-shirts and I think I'm gonna definitely put I instead of Thug Life, it's like Jira Life. So I'm gonna be putting on that shirt. I got the Cricut and so I'm gonna start making t-shirts. So I can have them on my videos and my live streams. So I can justify the business expense of having my shirt. Hi Georgette, thank you for coming. Make sure you guys drop a like too if you guys haven't already. And we're just telling a story time here where I'm kind of walking everybody through my last 10-year career, and how I got into Jira. So, anyways, I got really good, and it was really really awesome, and I'm making a huge impact. But um, but the problem was I was like any decision that I would do within Northrop was so insignificant because it's 100,000 person company, and like these like pioneering, I call them like pioneering things that I was doing, right? Pushing the envelope of what Jared could do was just so insignificant to the bottom line of Northrop. And so at that point in my life, I decided to like just call it quits. And essentially I decided to leave the big corporate life behind and I went to a startup. I went to a 300-person company. Now, my career was 150,000 people at Boeing and 90,000 people at Northrop Grumman. And those were like the two companies I worked at. Hundreds and hundreds, well, not hundreds and hundreds, but thousands and thousands and thousands of people, right? So really, 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 really small fish in a very giant pond. And I was like, what would happen if I took all of these skills and 180'd my career, right? Like went into a company where I'd be one of 300 instead of one of 100,000. And so I took the opportunity. A small startup here in San Diego hired me for basically the exact same role, but a lot more focus in the software development aspect of it because of my software background. And yeah, so I went to Brain Corp and I basically did that thing. The only thing here was it was in the cloud. So Jira, this was my first exposure. So this is 2020. This is March 2020. This is day one of a California lockdown for a pandemic when I got this job at Brain Corp. And so this is my first endeavor into being the program manager, but now using Jira Cloud. And let me tell you, back then, 2 years ago, there's still a lot of difference. I mean, today, I think the features are getting kind of parity, but a few years ago, like there was a noticeable difference. I still got to use Jira Cloud when it was like that ugly blue bar on the left hand side. I know some of you know what I'm talking about. If you guys have been using Jira Cloud for a while, you know that Jira used to have like this ugly like blue menu going across the left hand side. It was the most confusing thing in the world. I was used to the navigation on the top because Jira server has the navigation on the top, and so moving over to that ugly blue thing was like so different. I struggled for like a few weeks, but then after a few weeks, I figured out how to use the cloud, and then I got admin rights because again, I used to be an admin, and so a lot of like my first year at that company was establishing processes, and Jira guy hated that UI. Yeah, well, I got a couple of chats here. So by whose merch would that be? I don't know. I want to eventually figure out. I'm growing here on taking a pause on the story here. I'm growing. This channel's growing pretty well. I'm gonna cross 2,000 subs maybe by next week. I was hoping to get there by Halloween, but I think I might be about a week early. And so as this thing gets momentum, I think having some merch would be cool. My little monkey logo, I'm sure you guys have seen it. I have it like in all my videos, and I have this. I love this little monkey. That's for Ape Tech, and I just kind of want to put on some shirts and stuff. And so I'm gonna figure it out. But Gary, take my money. you will, I will for sure have no hesitation doing that. And Adeline, thank you for coming. Thank you so much. And then Jura guy, thanks for that comment. Anyways, back to the story. I just want to acknowledge everybody that's in the chat. Um, and so anyway, I'm at Brain Corp, and what was interesting though is like this company knew how to write code, but they had zero processes. Like they had no idea what they were doing from a scalability perspective. They knew how to write code and they knew how to get on the robot, but like collaborating and talking across different teams and like making sure people didn't step on each other's toes, like that was like non-existent. Like everybody kind of just stumbled, and there was a lot of duplication of efforts because there was just no visibility into any of the work. So that year that I was at that I was at Brain Corp, my job was basically not only delivering software out to the fleet of robots, but it was establishing like processes and tools and governance around like here's how we should develop software so that we're more efficient and not kind of tripping on each other. And I also, this is my first exposure to this company hired a lot of international folks. I had never worked with international folks at this level. Boeing and Northrop, very much US based, US only, US citizens only, right? So you don't get a lot of diversity in these companies. So it was my first time working at Brain Corp where it was like, I didn't only have like a process or a tool barrier, but like I had to learn how to communicate with folks whose English was not the clearest. And so I learned that. That was a big struggle for me. And then communicating Jira to other folks was different. Having them like convincing them to why Jira was useful was also very interesting because at Northrop and Boeing, I never had to convince people that Jira was good, right? They kind of just assumed their boss was like, hey, we're all using Jira or we're all using TFS. Everybody's gonna use it. But at Brain Corp, it was like these were all researchers, they were all PhDs, and they're like, I just want to write code. Like, I don't want to put stories. I don't want to make epics. I don't want to do any. I don't want to estimate. I don't like. I've never seen a bigger group of people that are like, no, 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 we don't want to do any of this. And so it took me a while to like convince them like the value because there was obviously so many miscommunications at Brain Corp where we just didn't we weren't efficient, right? Like one person would do some really cool thing in one part of the code, which would like completely trash like two other teams' like entire code base, right? And so like once we would push it out to the robot, there was no checks in place. There was really no testing. I mean, there was testing, but it wasn't like at that scale where we're like really capturing stuff. Regression testing was like at a minimum. And so like just introducing these concepts of like higher quality code and doing these things was like one of the bigger things that I kind of focused when I was at Brain, and just trying to add some rigor and some just maturity to the organization. So that's basically what I did for a year. And I really liked working at Brain. The only reason I left Brain was I kind of really wanted to do this YouTube thing. And I was like, well, I don't want to quit my job because quitting your job in the middle of a pandemic was didn't sound like a good idea. And so after months of going back and forth, I was like, you know what? Finally, there's ever going to be an opportunity where I quit my job, it should be now when so many people were losing their jobs during the pandemic that I figured, well, if I have a gap in my resume, it'll be easy to explain because I can just say that like, hey, it was budget cuts, pandemic, COVID, all that good stuff. Like, and so people wouldn't necessarily see that I took a gap because I was not performing, but I took a gap because again, so many people had gaps in their resumes at that point. And so I decided to just bet on myself, and I left that life at Brain and kind of went over to like consulting. So I don't have much to say here on the consulting other than the fact that this basically brings us up to like last year. And so in 2021, that's when I quit Brain. I quit on April 2nd. I was going to quit on April 1st, but I didn't want my boss to think it was an April Fool's joke. So I quit April 2nd, and basically I went into cybersecurity. So my very first thing that I was doing once I quit like Brain Corp and I left this TPM life, I left the Jira life, I left the IT life behind, I left the software life behind. I was like, let me do cybersecurity because I had at that point I was a certified ethical hacker. I was Security Plus certified. I had tried my luck with CISSP, but holy moly, that is a test that is not for the faint of heart. And so I completely failed on that one, mainly because when I took the class and I prepared for the class, I did it in the old way of taking the test. And in between when I took the courses to when I actually took the test, the governors of the CISSP decided to change the test. And so I was not prepared for that new format. And so I think that's what killed me the most. But anyways, so I decided to do cybersecurity. So I started easy. I started doing easy things. I started doing trainings. I started doing teachings of cybersecurity. I had to do a Spanish-based cybersecurity for a company based out of Mexico. So I was just kind of doing things that I was way outside my comfort zone. Because even though I speak Spanish, but not technical terms in Spanish, like there's only so many ways for you to say like spyware in Spanish. It doesn't translate very well, and so I kind of struggled with it. Imposter syndrome really kicked in once I started getting asked for like pen tests. I started getting asked for like things that were a lot more serious, and I was like, "Wow, I've never done it before." Um, and so we need to make the Jira life a thing. Yeah, that's I'll get my wife on making a logo. She's like my graphic designer. Um, and then we'll have to publish it out. Maybe I can do the Jira life. I did enable like super chats. That was like YouTube sent me like this notice yesterday or today about like, hey, you should enable super chats. Um, so maybe I think I can give out like special little icons or something that you guys can all use in the chat here to kind of differentiate between like my group of people that kind of get together versus just like random people that just don't come as regular as you guys, right? But anyways, we'll talk about that later. I'll send you a tweet. You're a guy. Anyways, so yeah, so cybersecurity kind of like got overwhelming for me, and like about I don't know a month or so into it, I was like, what do I do? Like, what am I good at? I don't want to code because like I was thinking of doing web design, but I was like, well, that could be stressful too. So I was like, what else am I good at? And then I remembered, I'm like, oh yeah, I got this Jira knowledge. I should probably do something with it. And and that's kind of where I decided like, okay, so let me try my luck with Jira. So I created like an Upwork profile. Well, I rebranded my Upwork profile and my Fiverr stuff to be Jira. And so I started putting my information out there. This was like Mayish timeframe of 2021. And so I was like, hey, I'll do Jira administration. And so to kind of start winding the story down, because I know we're 45 minutes into it, but to start winding the story down, Memorial Day of 2021, I decided I was like, you know what? I've been doing this consultation stuff for about a month, and it wasn't bad. I had probably made like maybe $3,000 since April 2nd that I had quit my job through like almost Memorial Day. So it wasn't too bad. But granted that I had a good six-figure salary before, it was very different. It wasn't like the same consistent paycheck that I was used to getting. And so it was very, very different to kind of just take a gamble. I was making a couple $1,000s, which is good, but I was like, this needs to be more sustainable. So Memorial Day, I basically sat with my wife and we were like at my parents' house on a nice warm Memorial Day Monday. And I told my wife if I don't make $10,000 by Labor Day, which is about 100 days away, I'm gonna quit this whole like me trying to do consulting or freelancing or whatever I was gonna call it at the time, and I'm just gonna go back and try to get a regular job again, right? And I'm just like, because the reason this was important to me, the reason this is so valuable for me is like in 2014, I dreamt of like starting my own thing. I dreamt of like having my own YouTube channel. I came up with Ape Tech in 2014. Um, but I didn't register. I didn't really take this serious until um, Father's Day of 2021. I had a kidney stone that landed me in the hospital, and I thought that was it. I thought I was gonna die. I thought that was the end of life. If you've ever had a kidney stone, you probably empathize with this pain that I was going through. And so I'm like sobbing in tears in that emergency room, thinking that this was like the end of my life, and I'm like looking back and saying I haven't achieved anything with my life. Like it hurt. Like it finally hit me. And so that's kind of when I went and registered like Ape Tech, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna take this serious. That August, I once I took a class on here through San Diego, like they helped me out, figure it all out. But then I got my website going, and like then I was like, okay, I'm taking this serious. And that's kind of like when I was like started to like basically phase my way out of brain and into like how do I quit my job in 2021. And so yeah, that's scary to leave a good paying job to follow your dream. So Gary, let me put this on the broadcast here for everybody to see. But I will say I haven't mentioned something really key, right? Like I would not have done this had my wife, who's a software engineer, have her six-figure salary. that was basically maintaining everything. So my wife and I did some back of the napkin math, and we're like, if things go south, like we're gonna be okay because um early on in my life, so my wife and I got married in 2010. We've been married for 12 years, and if you probably remember to the beginning of this story, um uh I didn't really start like my full time career until 2012. So that means that for 2 years of my marriage, I was still in school, I was still in college. And so one of my professors, she used to be my professor, but she used to work at Hughes Aircraft, which is like legacy Boeing. It's legacy Northrop. It's like in El Segundo, Hughes Aircraft used to be like the company to work at in aircraft and manufacturing back when they were in their my age. And so she gave me a lot of experience, and then her husband was like the CTO of Kaiser Permanente, which is like one of the biggest private hospital chains here in California. And so he was like in tech, and she was in tech, and like I looked at them as like big influences. So one of the stories that she always taught me and my wife, because we were her students, was that even though they made a ton of money, they never all their expenses never exceeded one of their salaries. So their mortgage, their cars, their life, it was all off of one salary. So when my wife and I got married, we, even though we were both software engineers or IT, or basically, even though we were very well paid engineers, um, our expenses never exceeded one of our checks. So for years and years and years, we always just saved one check and lived off of one. And so when I decided to quit my job, we were in a financial position where it was like, hey, it's scary, but we're not screwed. Right. And so I think that's what finally helped me just pull that trigger and just said, screw it, I'm done. I'm not gonna do this anymore because I didn't want to die like knowing that I've had this dream since 2014 of like kind of just doing things on my own here, but then like not doing it. And so I finally did it, and I got to do it. But then I only gave myself like 60 days because then I was like, well, this is scary. This is dumb. I shouldn't have done this. And so that Memorial Day, I drew that line in the sand. I was like 100 days to make 10K. And immediately that Tuesday, somebody called me up with like a $9,000 job. And she was like, can you do it? I was like, heck no, but I didn't tell her that. I just did it. So Noelle, if you're watching, sorry. But I, I, I took that challenge, and again, kind of doing things way out of my comfort zone. I had to do like a migration. And I didn't even know that it was a migration. Like the requirements that were given to me, like were not even close to what ended up, like the actual job ended up being. And so I was just completely doing things, just grabbing life by horns, right, and not knowing what the heck I was doing. And that worked out, and I got those $9,000. But like 2 days after that call with her, another guy called me up, and he's like, "Hey, I can guarantee you like a pretty solid like 4 or 5 thousand a month until at least the end of the year." And I was like, "Well, at that point, I hit my $10,000 like 2 or 3 days after I started my goal, and like then my life kind of just completely changed, right?" So that's if you remember back from a video from like a live stream like 2 or 3 live streams ago where I was talking about like how to get really good at Jira, or how I got really good at Jira, right? Where it's like it's this consistent 12 hours a day. Like that's kind of where the genesis of all that, right? Like that Memorial Day kind of triggered this like I tripled down, quadrupled down on Jira and Atlassian, and just getting really, really good at it. And eventually trying to figure out the YouTube, right? So now I'm on YouTube. Now we're monetized. We're making a little over $10 a day. And so things are good. Things are looking up. And I'm excited. I finally lived the dream of being a YouTuber. I make again $10 a day, not a whole lot, but this is a long term game, right? I'm in this thing for a few years, and so we're slowly folding in Confluence. Although I see that Confluence doesn't really have as much of an interest as Jira does, but I do plan in the month of November start folding in like Jira Service Management, and obviously Jira. There's always going to be a ton of content for that, and so I'm going to pull that stuff in. I'm going to pull Bitbucket in. So I'm going to be starting to pull in some of the other tools and kind of start showing if you're not catching on, right? I'm going to start maybe creating more of a DevOps thing. And so eventually we're going to have like test management, requirements management, automated testing, all that other great stuff, builds and just pipelines and automations, and just I have a ton. I basically have like the next 5 years like pre-planned here. And so consistency is really, really key. And I think I did want to get to the 5 reasons why. So like um, now I also teach, right? So I if anybody needs any private teachings of Jira and stuff, like obviously I have my YouTube channel, right, where I basically teach. But if anybody ever needs anything more private, like I'm working on courses, I'm working on like in person stuff and like virtual stuff. Can't confirm Confluence never done as well as Confluence. I think you mean Confluence never done as well as Jira. um, but anyway, so let me wrap this one up here. Let me close this up with my 5 whys, right? So I kind of bait and switched you a little bit where it's like, hey, 5 reasons why you should consider Jira as a career, right? And so I kind of walked you through my career. I wanted to give you that perspective. I wanted to give you that like my journey because where I'm at today, like what I do with Jira, right? It takes talk about migrating. There's a couple hundred videos for you. All right, Gary. Yeah, let's do I have you like on LinkedIn or something, Gary? So like I can send you a direct message. I'd love to whenever you want to collaborate, I'd love to chat. But anyways, so I want to give you my 5 whys, right? But I think these whys will now mean more because now that you know kind of the struggle of the life that the choices that I had to make and stuff like that, I think it'll be a little bit more relevant. So why did I pick Jira? So one, everybody uses it. Like it's the number one, hands down, the de facto agile tool out there. There's a lot of competition. There's like Monday.com, Notion's getting popularity, ClickUp is getting popularity, Trello, Jira Line, version one, Rally, like the list can go on and on and on, right? But still, hands down, Jira knocks it out of the park. Um, and so I will get I'll put so Gary, I'll put my information right now. I'll share my LinkedIn um right before I close this out. And then Kadiatao, let's I'll answer your question in a second too. So anyway, so everybody uses it. So one, I see from a longevity thing, like it's a pretty good career, right? So a lot of companies using it, not only software but banks and pretty much everybody and their mothers is like jumping on the Jira train. Two, it's always changing. So if you're looking for like this thing where like you want to consistently be learning it and you don't want to stagnate, like Jira is always changing. So from a career perspective, you're always gonna have to learn. You're always gonna have to go to conferences. You're always gonna have to be in the community. You're gonna have to be talking. You have to be learning. You have to be experimenting. And I think that's healthy for my mind. And so that's another reason why I picked Jira over other tools. Three, the Atlassian community, right? Like community.atlassian.com, this live streams, the YouTube, the other YouTubers, right? Gary here, we're talking about potentially collaborating on some stuff, right? This is so much is happening, and I'm sure it's applicable to other tools and other domains as well. But I really love this Atlassian community. I think Jira guy, you and I talked about it before when we were on a call once, right? Like just the community, it's really welcoming. If you try to do this from just an agile perspective, like the pure agilists out there, like holy moly, that's a different breed of people, right? But the Atlassian community, like they're very warm and welcoming and like encourage experimentation and stuff like that. So I really, really like that from that perspective. Also, Jira is easy to use. It's actually not that complex. I think I got Jira down where I can teach somebody in under an hour how to use it, and they'll have enough to just go and be very successful, right? So it's easy to teach, easy to use, and I think it's simple by design. I was looking at Capado recently, which is like a competitor to like this whole DevOps stack, and I'm like looking at like the 50,000 menu options that you have. I'm like, how was anybody that's new to this space ever supposed to learn and be comfortable with this tool? So very, very different tool, and I really, really enjoy it. And that's again why I pick it because it's just so easy. I mean, it's complex in nature, but it's still very easy once you peel back the right layers. And then the final reason is like I've invested a lot of time. So if you guys have heard, right, 2016, 6 years ago is when I started my career with Jira. So I'm really good at it, and I'm in too deep at this point. I'm a little bit of some 41 here, but I'm a little in too deep, and I think I'm at the point where it's like, yeah, I can start learning like Azure DevOps is definitely something I want to learn. Monday.com is something that's like piquing my interest because I'm like, why is like everybody going to Monday.com type of thing? So like I'm interested in other things, but I'm just like, I think forever, at least for the next 10 years at least, unless Atlassian completely changes things, because Atlassian I think is kind of going away from the way of agile and like more just team based with their like Atlas product and stuff. But unless things drastically change, like I see myself being in this space, at least DevOps in general, or like Jira with DevOps, for a very, very long time. I think there's just so much happening here, so much to do in this space. And so I think if you're looking for a career that has a good longevity, I have yet to find any competitor that matches Jira in its configurability and usability. See here, you're hearing it from the Jira guy. And so I think these are my 5 whys, right? And so hopefully this inspired you. Hopefully, I know we're right at the top of the hour here. Hopefully this inspired you and encourages you to, if you haven't considered a career with Jira, right? Like, there's just so much to do, right? From a Scrum Master perspective, from a Jira administrator perspective, from a developer perspective. I didn't even talk about plugins, which is something that I really, really want to get into at some point here within 2023. And so there's just so much. And I think like that excites me. That shows me that there's a long runway of a career. It's not something that I'm gonna be able to do for like a year and then be panicking. I was like, oh man, what I do? I'm gonna be out of a job type of thing, right? So I think from that perspective, I really, really enjoyed. So, anyways, I think that's it for this one. I think that was it. I gave you my 5 whys, so I didn't lie to you. I started off with 5 reasons why I chose, and I don't even know this is proper English. Picked. I don't know. Ignore the chose part. I always forget between chose and choose. But anyways, this is why I picked it, and hopefully this kind of encourages you. If you made it this far and you haven't dropped a like in the chat, please do that. It does help out a lot. Jira guy, you just don't want to have change your name. Yeah, Jira guy. I think I might have to take yours from like Jira guy to like the Atlassian guy or something, or maybe I should be like the Jira guru. I'll at some of my teams call me Dr. Jira, so I like to introduce myself sometimes as Dr. Jira. But that's taken. But I did see a license plate, and I was thinking Jira Doc would be like a really catchy little license plate. Maybe that can go on a T-shirt, the Jira Doc, and then we'll do the Jira Life as well. So, anyways, thank you all very much. Appreciate you coming in and watching this entire thing again. Hopefully, it motivates you. I mean, you're not entirely wrong, but the domains are cheap, so we'll see. So, Jira guy likes to buy a bunch of domains and then sell them for a bunch of money to suckers like me, right? Anyways, see y'all next week. I did put a poll out, so Gary, thank you so much for answering. I think you were like the only one, but I'd like to know: do you guys like these live streams? I enjoy them. I don't care if there's at least only one person in here, but I like to do them. I think it helps with the community part. And so, oh yeah, and so Gary, before we leave, let me go on my LinkedIn here so you can find my profile. So it's going to be just linkedin.com. I think I can put it in the chat here. Just famous last words that I put this on the internet. But follow me, connect with me. I should tell the story about how I became. Yeah, Jerry guy. Maybe we can do an interview one time. Like I think I don't have with my software. I don't have the live the recording, but I think I can upgrade to like the paid version. Well, I am on a paid version, but I can upgrade to like the premium version of my tool, and I think that lets me do interviews. So if that's something you're interested in doing, let me know, because my renewal comes up Thanksgiving, so I can definitely like upgrade then and maybe have you on and chat a little bit. So same invite goes out to you, Gary. So if you guys want to collaborate on something, let me know. All right. Well, thank you very much. That's it for this week, and I will see you all next week. We're going to be talking advanced roadmaps part 2. Oh yeah, my link tree. So yeah, so the link tree is here. So if you click on the Atlassian content I create, here's this link. And so this basically brings you back. If you haven't subscribed, I'm pretty sure everybody here has subscribed, but tell your coworkers, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your family. We're trying to get to, let's see where I'm at right now. We're trying to get to 2,000 subs. I'm growing at about 100 a week, which is really fun, really exciting. I used to grow at about 200 a month, and so now I'm doing 100 a week. So I basically doubled that, and so this is really interesting. So growth is really, really, really good here. I'm really happy, and I'm making about $300 a month. So again, thank you to everybody that watches these. Every like, every comment that you guys give in these videos, again, it helps out with that algorithm. So share, watch, retweet, whatever you're gonna do. I appreciate you all, and I will see you all next week. Bye.
I feel nauseous, believe me. Never had a lot of shit come easy. Had to work hard, struggle just to be me. Had to rise up just so they could see me. Did what I had to do just to feed me, and what was left over I put towards my dreaming. But the only thing in life that has meaning are the things you gotta work for, believe me. Take into your hands a plan, your own hand. hands can land your own brand. And damn, I feel like no one takes accountability. They want the credibility, convincingly unwilling to put in the hours it takes to get some power. Don't be f***ing sour, take a cold shower, scream until you're louder, work until you're prouder, and f*** all the doubters, they're just your downers. I swear to God they all let me down. I always fought just to wear the crown. I'm f***ed off at these f***ing clowns who were all taught they deserve an ounce. It's only worth it if you work for it. It's only worth it if you work for it. I won't stop till they hear me now. I won't stop till I wear the crown.